from LPI Studios in Memphis, Tennessee. It's R&R on Sports with Uncle Howard, Howard Robertson.
You will only see Tony Romo this season if something happens to Dak Prescott.
Jennifer Conroy.
There are less pieces on the Raiders. There's been the move, and the whole culture has kind of had to shift into LA out of St. Louis.
And the magnificent Larry Robinson.
I think this whole concept of college football playoffs is an absolute travesty.
It's R&R on Sports.
Hello, world, and welcome to a little R&R on Sports. I'm Howard Robertson.
And I'm Jennifer Conroy.
And I am the fantabulous Larry Robinson. What's up, America? We are here this weekend.
Back again.
What's happening?
Back again.
What's
you can't
happening?
run us away.
One word.
You can't run us off.
If you miss any parts of this or you just want to hear it again, make sure you go check out our podcast. We really are a podcast masquerading as a radio show. So, literally go to your iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, any of that, and check it out. We got many shows.
Enough commercials.
Okay, so what's up? What you got? What you got?
NCAA championship, Clemson, Alabama. Now, I will admit, I was predicting that the Tide would roll. And they did roll, but they ran into
They rolled until the last second.
And they rolled out. They rolled out.
They rolled away.
And they got a proctology exam on the way.
You got to explain that. You got
a whole team of proctology.
They do, and they apparently have been doing it all season long.
Doing what?
Examining the
Examining what?
the
Okay,
nether regions of other players on downs. Grabbing and
Clemson
fondling
players?
And Clemson players have been.
Clemson players are doing this. They've
been to doctors.
Oh wow! They said turn your
and they've gotten away. Yeah, and apparently they say they do it to get underneath the other player's skin. But I've been noticing there's been a lot of touchy-feely stuff going on.
That's pretty freaky. But Deshaun Watson, all props.
Well, if somebody does that to you, how do you not pop up and?
Oh yeah. It's going to be a misunderstanding now. It's going to be a misunderstanding.
All right. Now, Deshaun Watson, you were talking about
Deshaun Watson
Yes.
is the man. Despite what I believe, and I want us to talk a little bit more about penalties, fouls, and calls.
Okay.
I think that they were clearly trying to hurt him.
Yeah.
Really?
I do.
You think Alabama was trying to hurt him?
Alabama was trying to hurt him.
Once they figured out that he was rolling,
I think they were trying to take him out.
I tell you, it was a fantastic game, but I still say that we are missing a true opportunity to crown a real champion. You need to have at least 8, 12 to 16 teams playing for the national championship.
Wait a minute. Don't you think that the process got it right this time?
No, I do not.
You don't think Clemson is the best?
I don't think it was decided on
college team.
No, because you had Penn State. You had
wait. I'm talking
you had
about the
other
best. It can be only one best.
No. I don't feel like I have enough data to determine that, and I think it wasn't decided on the field. You said they picked 4 teams out of all the teams in college football. I do not think
basically the top 4 teams.
No, because how can you say that when Ohio State lost to Penn State?
You can only make that argument, Larry, in one, maybe 2 cases.
No, I think you got Michigan. I think Michigan. I think Michigan would have played.
Kind of fell apart.
Those were the 4 best teams.
No, I do not. I think they were 4 of the best 8 teams. I do. I think they were 4 of the best 8 teams. And I think that literally we should have beat
Clemson that night.
Who could have beat Clemson that night? I don't know. But, I mean, different teams bring different things to the game. So
I know who it wouldn't have been.
It's all in the perspective.
It wouldn't have been Louisville.
It's all in the perspective. And we are speaking of perspective, we're going to give you a funny perspective on something. And y'all stick around. We'll be back with more R&R on Sports.
Hey, this is Dr. J.
Hi, this is Rika Ketchum.
This is John Hollinger, Vice President of Basketball Operations for the Memphis Grizzlies. Tim Brown, NFL Hall of Fame inductee. You are listening to R&R on Sports.
Hello and welcome to the Greater Holy Fire Church, where
Football is a religion. He's the Right Reverend Leroy T. Linebacker.
and he's my trusted deacon, Billy Ray Blitz. Today, friends, we're on assignment up here in Massachusetts at the home of Tom Brady. We've been sent here to perform an exorcism to exorcise out that heathen spirit of lying and cheating.
Amen.
Ring the doorbell, deacon.
I don't believe he's here, Reverend, but the door is unlocked. Oh my, Reverend, this is such a palatial mansion. Oh look, here's a needle on the floor.
What kind of needle?
An air needle for a ball. But how are we gonna exercise when he's not here?
Well, deacon, I've been doing this a long time. And what we'll do is exercise something close to him, and that works just as well. Grab that pillow off his bed, and we'll use that.
Okay, Reverend.
Okay, let me hold it here with your hands here. We rebuke the demon of lying and cheating out of Tom Brady.
Wow.
Lucifer, loose him.
Loose him.
Beelzebub, back your ass up.
Back that thing up.
Satan, set your ass down.
Sit down now,
Loose
Satan.
him. Loose him.
Loose him.
We rebuke him.
Reverend, I'm feeling something, Reverend.
Are you? Oh, Lord. I'm just too good. I messed around and exorcised the demon out of the deacon.
Woohoo! Woohoo! I got running in my feet, Reverend.
Wait, watch that plate glass. Amen.
R&R on Sports with iConversation.
The executive director of the NBA Players Association, Ms. Michelle Roberts.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
He is currently managing director and chairman of USA Basketball, Mr. Jerry Colangelo, with us here on R&R on Sports.
Thank you, guys. Nice to be with you.
The one, the only, Detlef Shrimp.
Hey, Howard and Larry, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
Ken Griffey Jr., how are you today, sir?
I'm good. How about you guys?
Catch iConversation on R&R on Sports, part of the Katsuki Network.
Football fans know some things just go together. Quarterbacks and receivers, face paint and superfans, game days and tailgates. State Farm agent Emerson Abel knows another winning combination, home and auto. Emerson and his team are here to help your life go right when you combine your home and auto insurance, which saves you time and money. So get your home and auto on the same team and score some savings with State Farm agent Emerson Abel, 901-837-7400.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is David West of the Golden State Warriors, and you're listening to R&R on Sports.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style.
And we are back. You
That
like
was
that
funny.
one?
That was funny,
You
man.
like
that
that
was
one?
funny.
You like that one? We are back. Hey, y'all want let's talk about NBA for a hot minute.
For a hot
Okay.
minute.
All right.
There are a couple of hot takes.
Okay,
Derrick Rose would be hot
Derrick
take.
Rose just said, I'm out.
Okay.
I got to go back to the shy. I ain't got to tell nobody because I'm a grown
You playing some
man.
hide
I ain't
and
gotta
seek.
ask nobody.
I ain't got to ask nobody.
Ain't gotta
I
tell nobody.
ain't got to tell nobody. I'm a grown man.
So why do you have to go back to
And then he
Chi-Town?
told Joakim Noah.
all of a sudden.
Well, you know, my thing is this.
How
I've
you
never
leave your,
seen.
you leave
I've
your
never.
job. You get
I've
a phone call,
never
you leave
seen
your job.
this behavior out of Derrick Rose. Now he played at University of Memphis, all his time in Chicago. Didn't agree with how he handled his injuries at times, but nevertheless, I never saw anything unprofessional.
Okay.
In this particular sense, it must be something pretty bad happening in Chicago for him just to
Hop a
break out
plane.
and keep rolling.
Would you not agree that Derrick Rose has a dark side?
I totally agree with that assessment.
I don't know if he has a dark side. I know that the way the industry has portrayed him, the way media has
but it's portrayed him based on acts that he has.
Well, I can't say that his dark side is any deeper, any wider than any other player. It's just how it's being covered.
I didn't ask you to
compare.
I mean,
I
just asked.
I think everybody has a couple skeletons in their closet. Just say that.
But I'm talking about a darker side.
No, how you gonna say that? That's so fannish.
Based on where he's from and how he came up. I'm asking
where he's from and the fact that he wears dark.
You didn't have to smack. You didn't have to smack like that. I mean,
Larry likes his freckles.
All right, so the Chargers on the move.
Chargers.
Yes.
Oh man.
They said bye San Diego.
Yeah,
I don't think LA needed another team.
Well, they got a big old stadium, and it is the number 2 market.
LA goes from
it's a super saturated market.
Just flood. Now they got two
terrible teams. The Rams are horrible, and the Chargers.
Are the Raiders coming?
Now the Raiders going to Vegas, baby.
Yeah,
we going to Vegas. We going to Vegas.
Speaking of Raiders,
what about the Raiders?
Kind of folded up, didn't they, bro?
Well, we lost our quarterback. Derek Carr is one that I would say was competing for
That's
MVP.
One position. Huh? What happened?
No, but I think it's a very important position. I think it's the most important position on the field when you're on offense. I mean, so the fact that we didn't have our leader. I think that's what hurt us.
Injuries have taken a couple of teams out of contention. But the Vikings got taken out early on with injuries. Yeah. So Super Bowl matchups. Who's your best matchup coming?
My best matchup?
Yeah.
My best matchup would be the Cowboys and the Patriots.
No, the Patriots?
Yes.
Really?
Cowboy for 2 reasons. Obviously, Patriots because
they're the new America's team.
Yeah, and the quarterback.
There's so much money.
And they are the reigning champs.
I'd like to see the Pats get destroyed, and it'd be cool if it was by the Cowboys.
And the Cowboys because ratings are typically ratings, typical NFL ratings that have tanked this season. That's a reality. That's a reality. Ratings, television ratings have tanked.
True.
Right.
But the highest ratings, all of the highest ratings included the Cowboys.
I can believe that. I mean, the Cowboys are pretty exciting.
If you have the Cowboys
I'm not a fan
of
the team, but I am a fan of Zeke and Zach. So, that's how I look at it.
Zeke and Dak.
I'm sorry. Zeke
so
and
do you
Dak.
give one MVP and one Rookie of the Year?
I mean, you could do that, but I mean, literally, I wouldn't even be surprised if they got co-MVPs. But you got somebody like Aaron Rodgers who literally has thrown the Packers back into the hunt after really having a terrible first half of the year. And I mean, this basically
think he's
going to
last?
Run the table.
Will he last?
Who?
Aaron Rodgers.
He's
going to finish. He's going to finish. Okay.
If the Cowboys end up in the Super Bowl, do you let Tony Romo have playing time?
It depends on where the game is.
Not unless I have to.
Yeah, but even not if I have to. But I think symbolically, if we're up and we feel pretty comfortable we win, I'd absolutely make sure.
If you're rolling, then you give him some garbage minutes.
Yeah, basically. I'd clear the bench, but I think Tony Romo deserves to. He's kept that ship afloat, even though he's been hurt a lot of that time. But I think he's done a great job.
He got that ship intercepted a couple
times. So hold on.
times.
So let me ask you something. You talked about this penalties, calls, and
fouls and calls.
Yeah. So what's up with that?
Well, here's what's up with that. I believe I think that we're seeing more and more of them, and we are seeing more. Particularly, let's talk about fouls and calls more than penalties. I already said that I thought that Alabama was targeting Deshaun Watson. But, let's talk about fouls and calls. I think that we are putting our officials in a very peculiar situation because we have so many.
Are you talking about basketball or football?
Basketball. I'm talking about basketball
I think
right
one
now.
thing, that 2-minute rule at the end is horrible. That's like throwing the officials under the bus for no reason.
It creates mistrust between players and the officials, and officials used to be untouchable, and now you've got guys that, if I hear and one,
by and large, they do a good job.
By and large, they do a good job, but we've created players who look at the ref after every single shot, and it delays the game. And if refs actually called every little, we'd never get through a basketball
again. I'm so tired of Russell
again.
Westbrook doing that. I don't know what to do. He does it. The entire Clippers team.
Now you know I am a huge LeBron James fan,
and
but I am so tired of him whining.
Yeah,
I'm like, now I know now LeBron doesn't get called fairly. He does not.
He doesn't. But
he
come
doesn't.
on.
But I'm like, God, LeBron, you've been in the league for 30 years. I mean, just go with it. Just roll with it.
And look at
bro.
the position. Look at the crazy position it puts the officials in.
Yeah.
So you're either hypersensitive, and I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the veteran officials. I'm talking about the younger ones.
Yeah.
You got some great vets among officials, but you've got some younger ones that are a lot more vulnerable.
We also have some women refs now.
So that's true. So they either become hypersensitive and making all kind of calls even when there's not one, or they feel like they're being played and they ignore some things that they shouldn't ignore. Yeah. So either way, it's not good for the game. I think it's a problem.
And it doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, there's no change. But I don't want to hear anybody yell "and one" ever again.
Don't you think it's kind of strange though that the NBA fines the players for saying anything about the refs?
That's what I was going to say. But then they do the 2-minute review.
And then they turn around and give this 2-minute report that basically says the refs made every bad call.
Messed up
and then if the player says it before the 2-minute
they get the fine.
Report comes out, they get a fine. Yeah. I think that's kind of it's like
you're allowed to say it, but you're not.
And I think the best officiating is essentially innocuous, where it does not
it goes with the flow of the game. It's not an interruption.
It does not have a deleterious effect on the outcome of the game.
It makes me upset because in the days that I grew up watching basketball, if you fouled somebody, like to get to the free throw line, you almost had to be bleeding.
Right.
Like it was a very physical game.
Well,
and now
these cats are kind of fragile.
It's
today.
ridiculous.
They are prima donnas.
Absolutely
kind of fragile.
ridiculous.
You breathe on Anthony Davis too hard.
Of the highest order.
You can't touch Chris Paul. You can't touch Seth Curry. You can't touch James Harden, which makes me want to.
Okay, but I still say Russell Westbrook is cold.
He is
cold. I mean, at this point, he has 18
he is cold.
triple-doubles. And then you got James Harden, who is balling. I mean, I am just impressed. Listen, guys.
Change the beard wax.
If you are not enjoying the fantastic ability of these ball players, you missing out on some tremendous ball in the NBA. I mean, this has been a phenomenal year.
And speaking of enjoying stuff, we want you to enjoy this iConversations we have for you today. We have had the privilege of talking to some tremendous people. So we're going to get into iConversation right after this.
Sexy lady. Oppan Gangnam Style. Hey, sexy lady. Oppan Gangnam Style.
Rolling down the street with my radio on, listen to Funky Politics.
The mayor of the city of Memphis, Mayor Jim Strickland. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. We keep it real, we keep it right, and we keep it funky.
4 o'clock, WDIA.
Funky Politics, part of the Katsukian Network.
Football fans know some things just go together. Quarterbacks and receivers, face paint and super fans, game days and tailgates. State Farm agent Emerson Abel knows another winning combination, home and auto. Emerson and his team are here to help your life go right when you combine your home and auto insurance, which saves you time and money. So get your home and auto on the same team and score some savings with State Farm agent Emerson Abel, 901-837-7400.
Hey, this is Shaq Adocious. And when I'm in town, I'm always listening to Howard and Larry on R&R on Sports.
Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel a good creeping up on you, so just dance, dance, dance. Come on, all those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep.
And here we are with our iConversation Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Welcome to R&R on Sports, sir.
Wow, it's an honor to be here finally, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Tell us about your sports interests growing up. What street was it? Woodrow, would you say? What street was it?
I was on Furwood Street.
Furwood Street in Detroit, Michigan.
And let me tell you, when I was 9 years old, the Detroit Tigers were involved in the World Series with the St. Louis Cardinals.
All right.
You know, in the American League, we didn't have that many, as they called them then, Negro players.
There you go. There you go.
We later on had Brother Ron, who got out of prison and did his thing. We had Gates Brown, Earl Wilson. But the National League had many more Negro or black players, and Lou Brock was on that team, and the great Bob Gibson.
Right.
And he mowed down about 17 batters in that first game. And from that day on, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball pitcher. I went down to the corner ghetto lot, where an abandoned home had been raised, and I was throwing that ball against the wall because that man was so phenomenal that he lit my interest in baseball. Of course, I certainly did not become a pitcher, but I fell in love with Bob Gibson and Lou Brock and Mr. Free Agent himself, who was on that team, who without him, free agency would not exist. And so, you know, I was deeply enthralled with baseball and then basketball, of course, being in Detroit with Spencer Haywood, being another guy who brought free agency to bear in basketball. And, you know, Magic Johnson was in the state, came down to my high school, Northwestern High School, hit about 35 points from the top of the key. I knew he was going to be a great one. So there's all kind of stuff that was involved, man. The appreciation for Arthur Ashe coming up and the historic legacy he left behind. So there was a great deal of sports. You know, I'm in Detroit there. Jimmy Walker, Dave Bing, of course, one of the great 50 greatest of all time.
That's right.
Lit up my interest there. So there's so much stuff that was going on besides the Olympics and everything else that people were interested in.
This is R&R on Sports, and we're speaking with noted professor, Georgetown University, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
You know, a lot of younger people, Doc, don't understand how it was growing up, and you mentioned it. Growing up back in the day, we had fathers who really raised us to be National League Baseball fans based on that being the league of Jackie Robinson. And so I'm like you.
It's sort of like being a Democrat, huh?
Yeah. It kind of is. It kind of
no doubt.
is.
I bet. And Kurt Flood is the person I was talking about who was the free agent. I meant to mention his name.
Right.
He was on that St. Louis team as well. But you're right, because they were known as the League of Jackie Robinson, as the more progressive league that was willing to take in the Negro ball player. And the American League was much slower on the uptake when it came to issues of race.
Absolutely.
So I also have Detroit roots. My mother is from Detroit. She grew up on Cherry Lawn around the corner from the original Motown house. So Detroit was kind of like the mecca in terms of I can see how your sports interests and your music interests collided, especially at the time that you were growing up. You had the huge influence of Motown. You had the huge influence of sports. So Larry's talking to me like, get to the question. So is that where your musical interests kind of began to grow in terms of socioeconomic development?
No doubt about it. Great and perceptive question, as was the previous one. Yeah, no question. I used to live down the street from that original Motown house, that apartment there, that house there on the Grand Boulevard. In fact, I got evicted on Christmas Day, but I don't want to go back to there. Down the street from that place, across from the Henry Ford Hospital. But yes, you know, I'm in Detroit with Motown. You know, Berry Gordy, Smokey Robinson.
Yes.
Right.
Originally Gladys Knight and the Pips before they moved on. Martha Reeves and the Vandellas.
Stevie Wonder.
The Supremes, the Temptations, on and on and on. And then, of course, the great Stevland Morris, better known as Stevie Wonder.
Yes, he is my favorite.
Oh, my God, he's an amazing man and the artist. And the last great signing in Detroit before they moved to L.A. of course, Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5.
You know, I missed...
Those roots are amazing. And then, of course, the greatest voice we've ever heard, Aretha Franklin, came from Detroit. So there's so many great artists that from Detroit.
She came through Detroit. She was born in Memphis.
Yes.
Get him right. Get him right, Howard. Get him right.
She was not known in Memphis. When she was in, that's just like saying Michael Jordan is from Brooklyn. That's but I understand.
Stevie Wonder said I was born in Little Rock.
Listen, this is R&R on Sports, and we're speaking with sociologist, ordained minister, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Hey, Doc, listen, we got so much about sports that I want to start with, but I got to bring up a quote that I saw you on a Sunday morning program, and I won't name it, but you were talking about Donald Sterling, and here's your quote, and I want you to add some context to it. Personal beliefs led him to deny Black and Latino people housing. That is empirical proof of privately held existential belief. Now, I ain't never heard that existential beliefs, privately held. I mean, I just think the way you phrase that as it relates to Donald Sterling and his issue with the Los Angeles Clippers was just phenomenal. Can you add some context to what you thought about the situation as the players and the league went through probably one of the most, obvious racial issues in the history of the league?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah, people were talking about whether or not Donald Sterling is a racist, and I'm talking about the practices, the empirical, that which can be verified or falsified through the census. Mm-hmm. Common sense. You look at it, you can see it, touch it, taste it, smell it. We know what it is. And so Donald Sterling had evinced some of those very negative viewpoints in terms of the housing practices that he had been, cited for and censored for in the state of California. So, we have proof that this man has had problems, along with his wife, quite frankly, at that point, with African-American people and people in his houses and the like. And I think that, look, to Adam Silver's credit, he handled that situation expertly. Immediately, he was not dilly-dallying around. He spoke directly to the racism that was explicitly expressed there. He didn't show any tolerance for that, zero tolerance for that kind of bigotry, and moved quickly and effectively to have this man removed as an owner in the NBA and move that team into the hands of Steve Ballmer, who's been happy ever since. So the point is that Adam Silver did an extraordinary thing. The players themselves stood up and spoke up, whether LeBron James or CP3 and others, who made it plain that that kind of bigotry has no place in the National Basketball Association, which, ironically enough, is composed of at least 80% African-American players. Right. So when you look at it that way, the league had little choice, but it did step up and do the right thing, and the players, expressed their conscience in, I think, an admirable fashion.
Well, you brought up a really good point in that you saw LeBron and others step up, and what I want to know from your perspective is, what do you think the effect of LeBron, if we could fast forward 20 years and look back on his time with the league, what do you think will be the legacy that he will leave? Empowering your childhood friends, making a statement, being socially active. What's your take on him, and what would you say that his legacy will be if we were looking back 20 years from now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think LeBron is obviously going to go down as one of the greatest basketball players of all time, just in terms of his physicality, the nearly otherworldly athleticism that he embodies, fusing a kind of Magic Johnson panoramic vision of the court with a kind of Michael Jordan / Kobe Bryant, sheer ability to play the game and to have enough basketball IQ to be the general on that court. So he's a phenomenal basketball player, but outside of even his play, as you've already indicated, teaching his childhood friends the game. Not only is the game of basketball, but the game of sports, management, the game of being an agent. Look at his own agent right now, Brother Rich. He had him intern with one of the leading figures in basketball, and then when he was ready, put him in charge of his business, his own business partner, Maverick. And he have forged a tremendous connection that includes global recognition of sports' ability to unite people. They have part ownership in a soccer team in England. So this is a man who also understood that African-American intelligence is something worthy of celebration, and that black people aren't just on the court, but they're behind the scenes. And empowering his young men was more than him, an individual person, empowering his boys. It was a statement to be sent that you can hire people who look like you, who grew up like you, who have high intelligence and great skill, who can be trusted with your finances and your future. And that sends an incredibly subconscious message as well as an explicit one as well. And then when you think about his intelligence in terms of how he structured his deals, he changed the game. First of all, by deciding that he would join with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and go to Miami
for less money,
and everything about that. But the reality is that usually players are sitting on the sideline looking up on ESPN to determine whether or not they've been fired or traded. And so he said, I'm going to take the prerogative of forming and fashioning the team myself, which was an extraordinary thing. And then by only signing a one-year deal with Cleveland, knowing that the CBA was going to be up and that there would be new money flooding, if you will, the coffers of many NBA teams as a result of a renewed deal with television and media. The man is a genius in so many ways and has changed the game in so many fashions and facets.
Well, listen, Doc,
we're going to be back with more R&R on Sports right after this.
Hey, this is Dr. J.
Hi, this is Rika Ketchum. This is John Hollinger, Vice President of Basketball Operations for the Memphis Grizzlies.
Tim Brown, NFL Hall of Fame inductee. You are listening to R&R on Sports.
Take a sip on my secret potion. I'll make you fall in love. First love that can't be broken. One drop should be enough. Boy, you've been to me. I got the recipe and it's called back.
And here we are with our iConversation segment, and we're proud to have Mr. Jerry Colangelo with us here on R&R on Sports. Jerry, welcome to a little R&R.
Thank you, guys. Nice to be with you.
Good to have you. Good to have you.
Well, Jerry, we always start out with the question of the journey. Tell me what was going on in your mind when you made that trip to Phoenix for the first time.
Well, let me preface it by saying I was part of the Chicago Bulls startup back in 1966.
Okay.
And a year and a half later, was offered the Phoenix and Milwaukee GM jobs. I chose Phoenix. I tell the story that when I left Chicago, it was 20 below zero, and I landed in Phoenix at Terminal 1, and I smelled orange blossoms. It was 70 degrees, and it was an easy decision.
Right.
I bet it was.
So once I accepted that job, I was the youngest GM in pro sports at the time. I was 28. And it was a wonderful experience getting a new franchise off the ground. We named them the Phoenix Suns. During my 4.5 decades with the franchise, I was the general manager. I coached them twice. I ended up putting a group together to buy the team in '87, and then sold the franchise in 2004. Also started Major League Baseball, the Mercury, the Rattlers.
Wow.
So I've been very involved with the community in terms of professional sports teams, and it's been a wonderful journey.
Wow. Now given basketball, given soccer, given the WNBA, given your exposure to the Arena Football League and all of that, is there a favorite in terms of that? I mean, do you have I guess this is kind of like asking which one of your children you like the best, but is there a favorite out of all the experiences you've had?
I think we have to be specific here, and I would say, basketball made everything else possible.
Okay.
In my case, I was a highly recruited high school athlete in two sports, basketball and baseball, and had major league offers as a left-handed pitcher. But basketball was my true passion, and it was basketball that got me the education, the exposure, the opportunities, and so that's been a lifelong passion for me. When I was inducted into the Hall of Fame back in '04, I told the story that when I was 7, someone handed me a ball and I smelled the leather, and it was the beginning of a love affair that's lasted my entire lifetime.
For those of our listeners who don't know, where you played and with whom you played.
Came from a very strong high school program in Chicago, Bloom Township High School, a lot of great athletes. Had 66 college basketball offers.
Wow.
I went to Kansas to play with Will Chamberlain, who was a junior when I was a freshman. Freshmen were ineligible.
Right.
And played freshman ball with Bill Bridges. And at the end of that semester, Will confided in me and told me he wasn't coming back. He was going to sign with the Globetrotters and wait a year before going into the NBA draft.
Right.
I transferred to the University of Illinois, was captain of the freshman team, captain of the varsity, was an all-Big Ten player at a time when John Havlicek and Larry Siegfried and Jerry Lucas and Mel Knoll and Joe Roberts were at Ohio State, Terry Dischinger at Purdue, Walt Bellamy at Indiana, Don Nelson at Iowa. It was a loaded conference, but it was, again, part of God's plan, I think, to put me in a position to have exposure, because after graduation and a short term in a business with a friend of mine, someone came to me with a dream, and that was to bring pro basketball to Chicago. Wanted me to be a part of it, and we spent 6 months hustling the deal, and that gave birth to the Chicago Bulls.
I would consider you as one of the early pioneers of the personal conduct policy. What has always been your guiding principle as it relates to working with professional athletes, and what can we do today that we're not that we're not doing as it relates to holding our players and our athletes to being positive contributors to society?
One thing I would say is that I had an advantage over other people in ownership, for certain, because I had played, I had done everything there was to do in basketball, and so because of my background, players trusted me.
Okay.
And trust is something you earn, you don't demand. When you have mutual respect, that goes a long way. So one of the advantages I had where players wanted to come to Phoenix, wanted to play for me, is that they trusted me.
Okay.
And that my word was my bond. Now, you can't teach that in a class. You either believe that, you either act that out, and that's the proof of the pudding. You can say a lot of things, but it's the results of what you say that really matter. So, I was a guy who built personal relationships with athletes. There was mutual trust. It helped considerably. I wasn't looking for an advantage. That's who I was. So I think rather than an arm's length kind of a cold business, it should be treated more like the way I described. I ran franchises and had relationships with players. So that is just a fact. That's my story, and I'm going to stick with it.
Now, speaking of that, Jerry, you've seen it. I guess you've seen the transition take place from the persona and character of a team being built around the players and the coach to the same being built around kind of the persona of the owner. I mean, I can, in a lot of ways, that's kind of where we find ourselves today. What do you think about that? I mean, is that as it should be, or should it be? Should it remain with? Should the owner really be that involved? Is what I'm asking you.
Well, I think owners the people who write checks have the prerogative
Definitely.
of being as involved as they wish to be involved. I think if we were to say what's the ideal situation, it would be to have a strong ownership individual or group who give responsibility to people who have expertise in the field, in the sport. Now I'm talking about management and coaching, etc.
Right.
Who are responsible to ownership. There are those who have the kind of personality who mix well, and there are those who don't. And I'm referring to ownership around players and coaches. So it varies considerably. But I want to tell you a little story. The guy who invented the game, Dr. William Naismith, once told a student in a class at Kansas University, because after some years, Dr. Naismith went to Kansas and was teaching some classes in physical education. Fall Gallen, who went on to become a Hall of Famer and a great coach at Kansas for decades, was in his class. And he asked a question about how important coaching was, and Naismith, the guy who invented the game, said, young man, the game was meant to be played by players, not overcoached by coaches.
This is R&R on Sports, and we have the pleasure of speaking with Jerry Colangelo, one of the greatest sports minds in the history of American sports. What is that special secret sauce that you see in a coach that makes you say, that's my guy?
I think it's important for one to have confidence in the person that you're looking at as your potential coach, and you need to kind of think alike, conceptually regarding the game and the building of a team. So you're not operating on separate islands. So I think it's important to, in an interview process, by way of example, it goes beyond someone's record, win-loss records or whatever it might be. It's philosophically, how would they approach the game? What's their attitude toward players? And you ask certain questions that give you great insight into the philosophy of that coach. And so it either is a fit or it isn't. But when you're finished with an interview, you can use that as a comparison to someone else that may be interviewed for the job. But again, there isn't anything such as black and white, in terms of the interview process to determine who might be your next coach. A lot of things in life are gut feel.
Right.
I believe in analytics. That is so prevalent in sports today, certainly in basketball. But I will tell you, you can look at all the analytics all day long. Unless you go see a player live and see his body language and how he communicates with a coach and with his teammates and all of those things that happen, only if you're there, you don't really have a grasp. And then secondly, you can't make two incisions, one in the forehead and one over the heart, to find out exactly who you have. Because those are the variables. That's what separates one player from another.
What is it that you saw in Coach K that said he's the one that we need to, number one, change the direction we're going so that we win the gold? And what makes you keep going down the path with him?
The first time pro players and a pro coach, coaching in the Olympics was in '92 with the great team in Barcelona, the dream team. Right. And so we had pro coaches in '96, 2000, and 2004. We finished third in the Olympics in Greece. I was asked to step in and take over the program. I said I would with full autonomy, where I picked the coaches and players. And so I decided to bring former Olympic coaches and players together to Chicago. We met for a day and a half. It was a wonderful opportunity with people who love the game, were there to assist any way they could. They each had a chance to talk about their Olympic experiences. We talked about possible coaching candidates, both pro and college. We talked about players. We did the whole thing, and they all knew I was going to make the final call, but I also was had so much respect for all of them who were there that they appreciated that. A great moment took place that night when Dean Smith, Coach K's biggest rival, in college back in the day, looked up on the board and he said, "Look, there's only one college coach who could do the job, and that's Coach K." And that came from his biggest rival, Dean Smith.
Wow.
That was kind of a moment. If you were a basketball fly, the wall you wanted to be on was in that room. And to hear some of the things that were being said was priceless.
Jerry Colangelo, thanks for being here with us on a little R&R on Sports. We'll be back with more. Now it's time to say goodbye to all our company.
M-I-C.
No, G-O-O-D B-Y-E M-O-U E.
I can't spell. I didn't do well in the spelling test.
That spells goodbye, mouse.
Oh, I was going to say Arrivederci.
Okay.
Sayonara.
Did y'all study up on additional
shalom or sayonara?
Yeah, I said that.
Y'all still pitiful.
Bye, y'all.
You're doing now like you ended last year.
Okay, so listen, check it out.
Ooh.
Who you got to shout out to? Who you want to say is doing something spectacular?
I'm gonna go with Colin Kaepernick, who continues to put his money where his mouth is, even if it's on the down low. And he went
down low. What you trying to say?
He went and donated.
Somebody putting their mouth on the down low.
No.
What'd you say?
He's putting his money where his mouth is and continuing in his platform of good, and he donated his entire fabulous shoe collection to homeless shelters throughout the Bay Area.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Yes, I'm telling you.
It looked to be like 1,000 pairs of shoes.
Now I hope they weren't all size 16s.
I shoot. If I'm homeless, I don't care.
You run around all the day, go homeless people in
I don't care.
in San
like
Francisco
wearing clown shoes.
wearing clown shoes, man.
But that is great. That's great. That's great.
He had some sweet Jordans.
That's a way to cap off what has been a tremendous season for him.
Yeah, I think so because
him.
But you know what? Check it out.
On the field and off.
His
an outstanding
players
season.
voted him the most admired leader on the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay.
And I think that says a lot about who he has been.
Right before they cleaned the management house.
Oh yeah, they cleaned house in San Francisco.
Speaking of leading, I want to acknowledge and shout out Warrick Dunn, former NFL player and Florida State running back Warrick Dunn, who is who paid it forward without really knowing with his foundation that financed Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, Habitat for Humanity.
And Deshaun Watson and his family basically grew up in one of those homes. Had his own room for the first time, and they got a fully furnished home after his mother contributed 300 hours of building other houses. They got their own house, and
he's done it for hundreds of single mothers.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
That wonderful. And now this kid is the national champion as a result of how he
be the good, do the good.
So he's going to do some good in the future. We got to say goodbye
to all our company.
Yeah, y'all be back with us next week, same time, same place. R&R on Sports always.
Don't forget,
rate and subscribe.
Talk to you later.
R&R on Sports is recorded live at LPI Studios in the heart of Memphis, Tennessee. Web designer Daniel Coates, executive producer Larry Robinson, written by Howard Robertson, and produced by Reggie Fine. R&R on Sports, part of the Kudzukian Network.